Okay, in this video we're going to learn about circles. So what is a circle? Think about it. What is a circle? Can you give me an answer to that? Pause the video, think about an answer, and then we'll write it down. So did you come up with an answer? Some of you may say a circle is something round. Okay, but the proper definition of a circle, well, think about it. How do you draw a circle? You need a center point, like this. So then you pick a distance and you say, okay, all the points that are the same distance around from this point. So all the, and I'm not doing a very good job here, but all these points are the same distance from this center. And that's what a circle is. It's the set of all points that are equidistant from a center point. Let's write that down. So if I draw a circle, I start with a center, and then I just draw like this. I let the computer do it, and you notice that each one of these points here, they're all the same distance from the center. So it's like your friend is standing in the middle and all the other friends are standing around the same distance away. So all these points are the same distance away. Now if I draw a segment from here to there, from the center to the circle, that is called a radius. Let's write that down. That's called a radius. So the radius goes from the center of the circle to the circle. And how many radiuses, but we don't say radiuses, we say radii. The plural of radius is radii. There's infinitely many. I can put the radius anywhere. Okay? So this is called a radius. There's another measurement that goes from one end of the circle through the center to the other end of the circle. What's that called? This blue line goes from one end of the circle through the center to the other end of the circle, and that's called a diameter. It's called a diameter. So let's write that down. And you may have already noticed something. If you look at the radius relative to the diameter, so the radius goes from the center to the circle, from the center to any point on the circle, and the radius goes from one end to the center to the other end. You may have already figured out that the diameter is equal to 2 radii. So there's our first equation. Let's write that down. So there's our first equation. The diameter is always 2 times the radius. But then again, if you think about it in terms of the radius, well, the radius is half of the diameter. So if you know the diameter, divide by 2 and you get the radius. So there's another equation. Let's write that one down. So now we have these two simple equations. Diameter is 2 radius, 2 times the radius, and the radius is diameter divided by 2. There's one more segment on a circle. Now if we draw a segment going from one end of the circle to the other end, but it does not go through the center, and that has a name. Let's move this over here. So I can move this maybe a little bit over here like that. So if it goes from one end to the other end but not through the center, that's called a chord. Chord. Let's write that down. Chord. Oops. Chord. Now we have our three measures of the circle. Now the radius and diameter are used quite often. The chord is not used that much, so we're not going to be using the chord, but just know that what it is. It's like a diameter, but it does not go through the center. Actually, the diameter is a chord. It's a chord that goes through the center. And the distance around the circle, so imagine this were a rectangle or a square, what would you call the distance around? Well, we call it the perimeter, but in a circle, we don't call this the perimeter, we call it the circumference. So the circumference is the perimeter of the circle, or the distance around the circle. So imagine this being a track, and you were running around the track. The distance of one lap would be the circumference. So just to review, the radius goes from the center to the circle. Diameter goes from one end of the circle through the center to the other end. And a chord goes from one end of the circle to the other end, not necessarily through the center. And in the next video, we're going to learn about the circumference. How can we calculate the circumference? How would you find the distance around here?